thank you so much for taking the time to catch up with Kessner. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a friend that goes back all the way to high school, Sheila. I'm really thankful and excited for Sheila to be on the pod today to hear a lot about what she's been through over the past few years and catch up with that. So thank you, Sheila, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
To start off, for the people that don't know who you are, really quick, who are you? What are you up to? We'll start off with that.
Cool. Let's see. I am 25 and I was born and raised in Hayward, went to UCLA, studied psychology there, and then post-grad moved back to Hayward where I lived there for a year, had a few jobs, didn't know what I was doing, um, made the leap to move to San Francisco, and I've been here since. So I'm going on 2 years now living in San Francisco, and transitioned from my really sucky tech job that I landed to now working as a preschool teacher, and I love it, and I'm super happy here. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm thriving.
That's awesome. I can't wait to talk more about that because when I think back to our high school days, right? I mean, coming from a small place where we were to moving off to these different university public colleges and then finding our lives through the young adult life, it's awesome to hear of how you've been able to transition at different points and adjust and be flexible and be in a place where you're at now, where you just said you love being a preschool teacher. So we'll get
Yeah.
into that, but to start things off, so reflecting back on coming from a small city in Hayward and then going to the respective colleges that we did. You went to UCLA, and at the time I thought that was awesome, just getting accepted into UCLA and just making the move to LA
For
for
sure.
school. Just talk about kind of your appreciation, or maybe not so much of an appreciation for just making that transition from Hayward to UCLA and the things that you went through in college.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. It was hard for sure. Um, I was really excited to leave Hayward. I was really excited to get into UCLA.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm super grateful for like my opportunity, but it was hard, like
Mm-hmm.
going to a huge public school. It was a culture shock.
Of course.
And I think like when you feel super pressured to immediately go to college, you forget to really like figure out why is it that college is important. I think
Definitely.
like I just kept thinking like, well, this is just the next step. So I
Yeah.
get there and it's like I don't think I took my studies as seriously as I should have,
Mm.
especially that first year. And I think a lot of freshmen will tell you the same thing,
Yeah.
um, where like you just don't really understand like the gravity of the
Of
situation. Like now I
course.
look back and I'm just like, I really admire people that go to community college first, figure out what they
Mm.
want to do. Um, and then they have that like motivation to like go to study the thing that they know they need a degree on.
Right. That's real.
Um, yeah. And then like you go to LA and then that has like its own obstacles
Of
because
course.
you're just dealing with a lot of like personalities
Yeah.
and your priorities kind of shift or things that you think you should be like caring about. Um, so yeah, it was like a juggle between like surviving my academics and slowly but surely, like I think towards the end, like my last year for sure, like I knew what I wanted. I knew that I went into to UCLA knowing that I wanted to have a psych degree,
Yeah.
but I didn't really know that I loved that until like
Mhm.
my third or fourth year after like I had tried other things and was like, oh
Right.
wait, no, like this is my field.
Yeah.
But I wish I had that my first few years.
Yep.
Like I went to UCLA, like we have such great like academics, such a great opportunity, and like sometimes I wish I had taken it more seriously, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I met amazing people along the
Of
way,
course.
and I learned a lot about myself, about my interests, and navigating. I think like the reason why college is so expensive,
Hmm.
although I don't agree with how
Yeah.
expensive college is, but you're not just paying for your professors, you're also paying for your colleagues and like the
Yeah,
people that you meet.
it's true.
So I really appreciate like the the ups and the downs that came my way because they made me who I am today. um, I'm appreciative of like all of the extracurriculars I was involved in
Yeah.
because that was what I had to look back on when I was like trying to figure out my career,
Mm,
was like,
that's
what
good.
is it that I love to do? And all I had was college to look back on. So I'm happy that I
Yeah,
like did those extracurriculars because then I was able to really think, what are my values?
it's
What
real.
Where did I show leadership? Where did I
It's real.
want to show leadership?
Of course.
And that for me was like being a camp counselor
Mm,
and working with those kids and meeting other people that really loved like serving those communities. Um, so yeah, like it made me who I am today.
mm-hmm.
But I never want to like paint it with
Yeah,
rose colored glasses. Like
there you go.
it's really hard
Yeah.
and it's really expensive.
Yep.
And moving away from home, although it's like really what I wanted and
Yeah.
I wouldn't have it any other way. The older I get, the more I really appreciate being next to a home base
Of
and being
course.
next to, and I don't mean that like biological family necessarily,
Yeah.
because I know everyone's situations are unique,
Yeah.
but just being near people that you know will take care of you and like
Yep.
who know you, who like
Yeah.
know who you are and can like
It's true.
ground you if you're like losing yourself, which like
Yeah.
you will in college.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, like all of that to say,
Yeah. No.
I appreciated my time.
Yeah.
You know, it is what it is, for better, for worse, for all of the in between.
So many things I like that from that because the first one in particular was you were just real right off the bat saying college was hard. I think, whether you're a high school student going into your undergrad or, you're a little bit older finding your way into undergrad, it's easy to get caught up in this idea of this independence, this new beginning, and get really excited for this situation that you're heading into. But for a lot of us, we're going in blind, right? Maybe we have an idea of what we want to do. Maybe we have an interest or, a so-called passion that we want to pursue. But at the same time, you're not prepared for the experiences. You're not prepared for the social settings. You're not prepared, like you said, moving to LA. Like you're just not prepared for so many different things that are going to bombard you once you get there. And for a lot of us, I can speak for myself also, the adjustment was really difficult. I didn't feel like I was capable at first. I didn't feel like I was mentally prepared. I was academically as prepared as some of my other colleagues. Like I felt fortunate in some areas, but there are a lot of other people that make you doubt whether or not you should be in college or not. So I think just focusing on being realistic too is a huge part of just starting off as a freshman. And I love how you attested to that, where it's not rainbows and bunnies, right? It's not just going in and excelling in your classes and finding really your true passion. Like it takes work to get there,
Yeah.
like you said. And so that's one of the things I do appreciate. But at the same time, I love how you said, you know, I don't regret anything I did, because through the process of finding myself in college, through the opportunities I had at UCLA, for example, like my extracurriculars, I was able to align what I was interested in with my values. And those were the two sort of premise or indicators of how I figured out my career, right? And you said that you loved being a camp counselor. And if it wasn't for UCLA, if it wasn't for your move down to UCLA, or just your undergrad, who knows if you would have found your love or your passion to work with kids. I think that's also another thing too, is you're going in blind, but it's this nice, wading in the waters of, where am I going to end up? Like, how will I end up? Like, what kind of person will I be in? It's funny because you're in control of that, but you're also not, because you also have to let these different situations affect who you are, and you have to be flexible and adjust to it. But I mean, you're still navigating that. And it sounded like toward the end of your college experience, you really found that for yourself. And so I just appreciate that, you're able to take in both the bad side of college, of whatever that is, but also for the good that it was. Because I mean, we think there's a lot of students out there in high school, or just, preparing themselves for college and wondering, is this really what I want? Like, is this really for me? Whether that's financially or, family settings and, expectations, there's so many different factors out there of, is college right for me outside of high school? And no one is to tell you that it's the right thing for you to do at the moment. You have to understand that and explore that and reflect that for yourself. I mean, for a lot of us, it was the next available opportunity. It was the next situation that would best position us to where we want to be. For others, maybe that's community college. Maybe that's looking into trade school, right? And these different options. So I just love how you took it by the reins when you could. Obviously it was hard, but you took those situations when you could, and you made it for the better. So I love that.
Thanks.
So looking back, or looking toward where you are today, I know that you said that you loved being a camp counselor, and that's how you really found your heart for your kids. And then, making that jump to SF, being a preschool teacher now, which is a huge part of your life. And it sounds like it's becoming a huge part of your identity, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Diving into kind of the teaching aspect of it. I mean, research from what I've read supports that going through preschool instead of jumping right into kindergarten actually helps in terms of, early childhood development and just greater learning and brain development as a child. So talk me through some experiences where you really appreciate being in a kindergarten or being in a preschool setting as opposed to, kids jumping right into kindergarten.
Yeah, I think that a big differentiation we also need to make is it's not a matter of school. It's not about the enrolling a kid in an institution.
Right.
It's about what's happening at the preschool that may not be happening at home.
Yeah.
I fully support the claim that it takes a village to raise a child.
Does.
And I see me being a preschool teacher as just being a part of that village. Because it's not all about academics the way that Western society is constantly talking about.
Right.
And it's just kind of unfortunate that kindergarten classes are becoming more and more academic when brain development is happening through play.
Yeah.
And through art and expression and reading and just feeling cared for by
creativity,
adults.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, so my preschool, we have quite the range of ages. We have a classroom with 2-year-olds, and then we have a classroom to 4 to 5-year-olds, right? And sometimes I think initially when I came into it kind of feels weird. Why are these parents sending their kids, their 2-year-olds to school? Why can't they raise them themselves?
It's crazy.
And again, it takes a village. They need support. A lot of people in San Francisco are transplants, unfortunately they don't have grandparents that can watch their kids and do all of those things.
Right.
And these families that I work with are very privileged, are more on the higher class end. I work at a private school.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, fortunately enough, are able to make that choice to send their children to a place where they are being socialized, where they are cared for immensely, and where we get to play all day and do art and just if they learn their ABCs along the way, great. If they end up picking up sentence structure along the way, amazing. These are things that are going to happen because of the environment that we're cultivating.
Of course.
But I also really want to recognize that that isn't an option for a lot of families because of the system that we're in.
Right.
However, it doesn't mean that we need to look down on people for sending their kids straight to kindergarten or sending them straight to preschool at 2 years old. Everyone's situations are different, and as long as the child is, meeting other kids, being socialized, being loved and cared for, there are so many resources out there nowadays, and I'm happy to see so many parents are taking that responsibility of becoming teacher now, and all of these other teachers and adults that are online sharing these free resources.
Yep.
It's really beautiful to see because, you know, it's before we put all of the responsibility on one person, whether that be teacher or parent.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing more of like kind of a collective coming together as best they can, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
given the situation.
Of course.
Um, so yeah, I don't know if they answered your question.
No, it does. Because I love how you touched upon this idea of at 2 years old, right, or however old your preschoolers are, parents need support. Parents, guardians, whoever's taking care of the child, they need support. And for some people, their situations allow them to maybe wait till kinder to enroll them in school, or maybe their circumstances mean that I need to enroll my child into preschool. But I loved how you said that you live by it takes a village to raise a child, because it really does. And I think back to just what it's like to not just grow up as a kid, right? But this idea of that we're constantly being supported by so many people at different points in our lives, right? When we think back to when we were children, right? We had so many different, adult figures or people that were supporting us. And even now, so just this whole idea of life and, developing as a person, it really does take a village. And what better way to start that off in preschool, where you have teachers now in your life, where you have, your parents or your guardians supporting you, and for some people, grandparents, uncles, aunts. It's great to have that as soon as a child can, and sometimes that best situation is preschool. And so when I was thinking about this, it's very easy to think about the academic side. Like you said, it's very natural for our society to focus on these standards, or getting them prepared, with college readiness in their mind, right? And just all this research base. But I loved how you touched upon it's more of just the social setting, the personal setting of just being able to be yourself, being able to focus on playing and developing what it means to just be appreciative for other people, and be appreciative for what you're doing, and being appreciative for the arts. And that's something that really does get overlooked, is this idea of how much art, or even just, yeah, the non-content academic side really plays a role in our social and our cognitive and behavioral settings. It really does make a difference, and it's something that really does get glanced over sometimes. But I loved how you touched upon that, even as a preschooler, right? My mind doesn't even think about what two-year-olds are doing, but I love how that's what they need right now. They need that time to play. They just need that time to be themselves, whatever crazy selves they are.
That's what
But
adults need.
yeah,
That's
it's
what adults
true.
need too, dude. Like, it's not just them. I look at these
Yeah,
kids and I'm like, we need a space like this in
I
all
love that.
companies.
I love that.
We need a space where people can go and there's paper and pens and no judgment art is happening, or a space where you can like play Foursquare or something. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
love that.
or just like listen to books being read.
Right, right.
And there's just, I'm learning a lot being with these kids.
Yeah.
um I think like adults are constantly striving to reconnect with their inner child, whether they know it or not.
Mm,
And yeah, there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from what we look at when it comes to like these kids, because it's not, I think a lot of people say the word like art and play and expression in a
right.
sense that's like outside of this academic bubble,
Right.
but it's
It's
in
so
that
too.
bubble.
Yes,
It
it's
is
put together.
academic.
Yeah.
Their brains are literally forming more like neurotransmitter
Yep.
connections
Yes. Yeah.
as they're doing that. And we as adults are also getting a huge benefit when we allow ourselves to jump into that space again
Yeah.
too.
That that's awesome, because I mean, for some people they compartmentalize those, right? It's arts, or the physical education versus the science versus the math versus the English.
Right.
But as teachers, it's definitely not like that. I mean, we can recognize that, but there's so much of the population out there that just doesn't understand it the same way. And that's fine, but that's why it's changing that shift of perspective, that paradigm of they work hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, because one really does develop the brain more than the other. One really does develop the social emotional than the other, right? And all these play into how well we cognitively grow, right? And so I love how you really said adults need that too, because honestly, like, I forget that also. Just being like like a young adult, grinding in the way that they, grinding through life of whatever that is for people, striving to reach a certain income, striving to work on their priorities of, right now it's just survival. It's really hard to just think of when can I breathe? When can I just listen to books? When can I just mess up a whole piece of paper? And I just love how that's what we need to focus on in times where, you're always thinking about what's the next thing. And, taking that
Mhm.
time for yourself, taking that time to appreciate the small things essentially is really important,
Yeah.
because grasping for that inner child is something that, like, at least I don't really grasp onto often. I think it's very natural to not focus on that and to focus on the adult aspect of life. But where's your inner child? And that inner
Yeah.
child does give you joy. That inner child does give you peace at times. And so it's a good reminder on my part, at least, and maybe for someone else that's watching or listening. It's find that inner child, because the inner child in you it's so raw, it's so genuine, it doesn't have any care. And sometimes we just need to, I know it's very situational, and I know that circumstance will hold you back from feeling like you can be a child. But whatever that means to you, maybe it doesn't mean
Hmm.
grabbing some paint and just painting a paper.
For
Maybe
sure.
that's not you, but whatever it means for you to get in touch with that inner child,
Yeah.
whatever,
I
that's
think
really
like
important.
another way of saying inner child is just be present,
Yeah,
like
there you go.
I'm learning more and more that that's all it
Yeah.
is kids just don't quite have that frontal lobe developed yet
Yeah.
for them
Yep.
to be stressing about their future and
Yeah.
worried about their past as much as
Yeah.
adults are.
Yeah.
So yeah, like if people need another word for it, like just try your best to find something that helps you stay present.
Mm, that's good. So, like, thinking about being present as your kids are being present in your class, talk about how has being a preschool teacher changed your perspective of what it means to be a parent. I know that you're not a parent, but I mean, being a teacher, we're essentially parents to these kids, for a good
Yeah.
majority of their time. So how has being a preschool teacher changed your perspective of what it's like to be a parent?
Oh my God, being a parent is hard.
I'm sure. Yep.
Um, I will, I try really hard to actively like never put down my parents, like no matter what it looks like on the outside,
Mm,
because like there are just so many situations. Not everyone plans to have kids. Some
right.
people have kids because of a societal pressure.
Right.
Some people really want to have kids, but they're not thinking anywhere past that
Yeah.
desire.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a lot of empathy for parents, a lot more than I used to.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes I think to myself like, oh, I never want to have a kid because like, wow, this is so much work. But on other times too, it's just it's another human,
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like gonna be your mini me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of parents like unfortunately reach that wall of disappointment. You are just giving birth to another human,
Yeah.
um, or adopting another human or what have you, and like they are their own person.
Yeah.
And you are giving them an environment and some personality, but they like sometimes me and my parents like will joke about like not my parents but like my kids' parents will
Oh,
joke
okay.
about like we'll look at them and say nice to meet you, like so this is her personality, like it's good to meet you, because every few months they're just growing more and more into themselves.
Mm, yeah.
um so yeah, I think like I'm getting a lot of tips working
Right.
with kids about how I would want to be if I ever become a parent.
Right.
um I know a lot on like the back end as well, just like academic wise,
Right.
what kids brains are like,
Yeah.
what they need. And so I hope that in my future, if I do decide to have kids, I will make a super responsible decision about like where I'm located
Mm,
and I'm going to make sure that I have friends that are ready to be aunts and uncles, because
Mm,
you best believe I'm going to bring my kids with me to socialize and like be in these situations
that's good.
and pass them off if I need a break.
Yeah,
Like
that's good.
parents, I think, feel this pressure to like do it all, right? Like
Mm,
it can be shameful
mm,
to ask for help. But I hope to one day live in a world where like a baby's crying on an airplane and everybody around them is taking turns like calming
wow.
the baby down,
Wow.
instead of everyone being like, oh, look at that parent, and like, oh, that baby won't stop crying. Like,
Wow.
we're a community, people. Like, that poor parent has probably been hearing that child cry longer than you have.
Man, wow. That's good.
So I hope to remember that, like, if I become a parent, I am more than just a mom. I am
Mm,
also Sheila. I am also a person who enjoys doing X, Y, and Z. And
wow.
I hope that I will be strong enough to like carve out that time for myself, because kids know when you're upset. They know
Mm,
when things are off, and they don't need to constantly have you being frustrated at them. Like,
wow. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
human. We're
Yeah.
human. That child is a human and you're a human, and like we all need to just be kind to
Mm,
ourselves. Um so I hope I really remember that.
yeah.
And yeah, um it's about respect, you know? You got to respect the child as a
Of
as
course.
their own human, and then
Of
also
course.
respect yourself as someone who will have your downfalls. Um and there's no perfect way to parent.
Yeah.
It's just you do your best, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's messed up. Like everyone has trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just gonna happen.
Right.
Um, so yeah, just being really realistic about it all, but
Mm-hmm.
also kind, and yeah, all of that.
That's so many good things in there. I think this, yeah, I mean, when I think about what it means to be a parent, right? I don't know what that feels like. I know there's so many other different factors that I'm not aware of, but just being a, coming from a teacher background, it's very natural to feel like a second parent to these kids. It's very natural. You see them for almost the same amount of hours. You see them during the day as they're like your kids, and then the second half of the day they're, their biological parents take over, and so you're essentially the second set of parents. And when I think of what it means to be a teacher, I mean, even a preschool teacher, it also means of, I am part of their lives. I am literally part of how they are developing. I'm literally part of that journey of them becoming, you know growing of age. And what am I doing that will support the parents, right? What am I doing that's going to make the parents' lives easier? And essentially that's putting you in a position, well, I have to be a parent, and what kind of parent would I want to be for this kid? And so when you talk about, placing my own kids in a community where I will feel supported, where I feel like I can go to X, Y, and Z to help me care for my child. And I think a lot of parents can attest that, there is this pressure where you have to raise your kid a certain way, or raise your kids based on certain expectations that you had when you were growing up. And not to say that one is wrong, but just know that there's support out there. I know that I'm not a parent, but I can say that, teachers are always willing to support. And, whether you can find hopefully friends, or hopefully find close family, or to find support. And through those moments, also caring for yourself, because this goes for any adult out there. Self-care is one of the hardest things out there. Finding time to self-care is really difficult. I can't even imagine what that's like if you have a child. And so this idea of self-care sometimes becomes more and more foreign over time as you raise
Yeah.
your child through preschool, kinder, first grade, middle school, high school. This idea of self-care just becomes, not so much of a priority anymore, because your self-care is rooted in the care of your kids. And so how do we find time to think about ourselves when we feel like there's no one around? But I think that's why it's
Yeah.
really important when you say you should be, that one of the things that you're going to keep in mind is, where can I root myself so that I have support? I'm going to be very
Right.
conscious of where I live and who I live by. And that's super important too. And something that I'm learning to come to understand is, where, yeah, what community is going to support me as I go through that difficult transition of raising a child. And You know, it's very easy to just focus on the physical space of, I want to live here because of X, Y, and Z. You know, it's also these other things too, like who's going to support you in that area, or what kind of community do you want to be a part of, you know? And so that's a really important part too, that I love that you mentioned, because it gets me thinking of not just, you know, what it means to be a parent, but what it means to, where's my support. And maybe one day we will fly on a plane that will support babies crying, because I will definitely, you know, put myself out there. I am definitely one of those people that says, why is that baby crying? I cannot stand.
So have I.
I know. No,
we all get annoyed.
Yeah.
But it's also because, like, that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
We're learning through actions, and we're constantly getting messages.
Right.
So I don't think those changes will happen overnight.
Yeah.
But I think the more and more we have conscious parents who remember that, although it feels a part of our, once you're a parent, I understand the idea of self-sacrifice for your child. You will do anything for your child.
Yeah.
But also remembering that if you're self-sacrificing yourself in a toxic way, your child will self-sacrifice themselves in the future as well. And just remembering those situations. And also, like, I don't mean to, like, scare people. Like, it's not going to be like a correlation equals causation type of situation. Right. Like, who knows what'll happen, but just being aware and being patient and kind and forgiving. Practice radical self-compassion, and reach out and just get different opinions.
Yeah. I mean, a huge part that you said was just building the empathy, right? The empathy for each other, you know, parents to parents, right? Out there, you know, we're not parents, but I mean, if parents are listening to this, you know, you understand parents more than anyone else. So that idea of, you know, being understanding for your child's teachers, or being understanding of your caretakers, or whoever else is helping you care for your child. It's just, we have to spread this empathy, this idea of understanding what it's like to be in the positions that we're in. So if there's anything that I got from that, it's just continue to build your empathy, and be open to that. So that's good. Thank you for that. I'm going to put you in a situation, and I just want you to respond in a few words, or however many words that come to your heart, Sheila. But so you're at a table. It's kind of dark. You're on one side. Like I said, it's dark, it's dim, but the lights start to turn up. And then as you peek over to the end of the table, it's 18-year-old Sheila. What do you say to her? You can't say too much. You can say as much as profound words as you want, but what do you say to 18-year-old Sheila?
18-year-old Sheila makes me sad. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You're gonna thrive. That's what I would say.
Thriving is a huge theme when I think about maybe just even hearing your own story, right? You know, going through struggles that you had, or even like battling with this idea of independence. I think that was one of the things when I think back to high school, is just this idea of being independent was a huge part of what you wanted out of just, you know, yourself. And, you know, hearing your story now and going through the motions and becoming this teacher that you really admire, of just being a preschool teacher for others. Thriving is such a great word, because going from a place of, you know, coming from this place of uncertainty, coming from this place of stress, of, you know, for other people, it could be depression, it could be anxiety, whatever that is for those people. But knowing that there's this word called thrive, and thrive starts from the bottom, right? And in order for something to thrive, it has to start from somewhere low, right? And from somewhere low, it can blossom, it can grow into something. And thriving means starting from this small place that is not really known yet. It's foreign, but it's this place that's not really on our radar yet. But in order to thrive, in order to grow to something great, big, successful, whatever you want to call it, happiness, you have to start somewhere. So 18-year-old Sheila has to start somewhere, and then she'll end up into a pretty awesome preschool teacher.
Yeah. Seriously, I love the imagery of like a plant growing, you know, and I think 18-year-old Sheila didn't quite have the that like radius of vision, which no one has, to expect where you're going to be in those like next few years. And so, you have to have hope and stay strong and have faith. That's why faith is so important. You just like really have to believe that it's going to get better.
It's real.
Yeah.
I say this pretty frequently on the podcast. If you are in that place where you're unsure, or you're just uncertain of what comes forward, it's okay. We've all been there. We hear it a lot. I know that you probably will not, this will not be the first time you hear me saying it, but it's so easy to absorb these words and not really make it any meaning for yourself. But if you trust in that, if you have faith in that idea that they will get better eventually. I'm not saying it will happen overnight. I'm not saying that it's going to happen in a day, in a year, in a decade. Maybe it will take more than a decade, right? But this idea, this timing of trusting in a bigger picture, trusting in this hope of a better version of yourself. By you just hoping for that better version of yourself, you're already positioning yourself to get to that position, right? So it's all about perspective. It's all about response, how you respond. But it's also about positioning. Are you positioning yourself? You're physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, are you positioning yourself to be open to that? That's something that's real and have to accept. So
it's a verb. It's a verb. You need to not only have the mindset, which is key, but you have to have the action.
Yeah.
And you need to remember that, every failure is you figuring out what not to do. Yep. And it's just it's so cliche.
It's cliche,
but like it's cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
And like, being stagnant is never going to make your life better. You have to get comfortable with taking risks and just like learning from all the tumbles that'll come. But like life is long. I mean, people say life is short, and like in some contexts I agree, but like life is also long.
Yeah, that's true.
You have the space and you have the time. So yeah, just do the thing. And
do the thing.
That thing can be find support. Like you never need to do it alone either.
There you go. A huge thing that I want to wrap up with is go with that mentality of that inner child, right?
Yeah.
Go into the idea of being present, being present, inner child. What does it mean to not worry about the thing right in front of you and just take a moment to breathe, take a moment to reflect, take a moment to smile. I'm learning that too. So inner child, everyone, it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good place to be.
Sheila, thank you so much for catching up. I definitely learned a lot. It's been really refreshing just taking the time to see where you're at. And I'm always appreciating the moments where you'll be in different spaces. Maybe it's online and supporting other people. I know that you mentioned that earlier. So I just appreciate your presence. I know it's been such a long time since we've caught up, but just hearing where you're at now and hearing the good that you're doing as a preschool teacher and just how happy you are. I can see it when you talk about your kids. It reaffirms me that the lives of my friends are definitely going in the way that they're meant to go in, so appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate you too. Thanks for reaching out. This is really nice. I could have talked so much longer.
And I wish we did. But until the next time, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you later, Sheila.
Thanks. See you later. Bye.